Some mistakes don't announce themselves with noise. They arrive quietly, like dust settling on a life you thought was solid. And sometimes the truth fits inside a velvet box. Scene 1. The morning after. David Chen sat at the edge of the hotel bed, his shirt half-buttoned, staring at the carpet as morning light filtered through the curtains. The room smelled of expensive perfume and regret. Beside him, the sheets were already cold. She had left early, as she always did, back to her own life, her own world. While he returned to he reached for his watch on the nightstand and saw it. A small jewelry box, navy blue velvet, placed carefully beside his phone. His hand hesitated in midair. There was a note underneath. David picked up the paper first. The handwriting was elegant, controlled, same hand that had once written him love letters when they were young, before life had pulled them in different directions, before he had chosen security over passion. David, I can't do this anymore. These were meant to be a gift. But I realize now they represent something I'll never have: your full heart. I'm letting you go. Please don't look for me. Be happy. Be honest. Be the man I once believed you were. His fingers trembled as he opened the box. Diamond earrings caught the light, scattering tiny rainbows across his palm. They were beautiful, expensive, the kind of gift a man gives to the woman he loves. But he'd never given Monica anything. She had bought them for herself, perhaps hoping he would notice, perhaps hoping he would finally choose her. And now she was giving them back, not in anger but in surrender. David closed the box and sat in the silence of that hotel room for 20 minutes, the note resting on his knee, the weight of his choices pressing down on his chest like stones. Scene 2. The life he'd built. David's home was in a quiet suburb, the kind of neighborhood where people waved to each other on Saturday mornings and children drew chalk pictures on driveways. He pulled into his garage at 7:30, the same time he always did after these nights away, early enough to shower and change before Catherine woke up, late enough to claim he'd been at the gym. The house was still. He moved through it like a ghost, setting his keys on the counter without sound, removing his shoes on the mat. 17 years of marriage had taught him where the floors creaked, which doors needed gentle handling. He had become an expert in returning unnoticed. In the bedroom, Catherine slept peacefully, her reading glasses still folded on the nightstand beside a half-finished novel. Her face was soft in sleep, the worry lines smoothed away. She looked younger, like this, closer to the woman he'd married, the woman who had believed in him when he was just a junior accountant with big dreams and bigger student loans. David stood in the doorway, the jewelry box burning a hole in his jacket pocket. She had given him everything: her trust, her youth, 2 beautiful daughters, a home filled with photos of family vacations and holiday dinners. She had been patient through his long hours, understanding through his stress, supportive through every career challenge. And he had repaid her with lies, not big, explosive lies, nothing she could point to and call betrayal, just small, constant deceptions. The late meetings that weren't meetings, the work trips that included detours, the emotional distance he'd wrapped around himself like armor, telling himself it was stress, telling himself it was normal, telling himself everyone did it. But standing there watching his wife sleep, David felt something crack inside his chest. Scene 3. The beginning of Monica. Monica had been his first love, back when they were both students with more dreams than sense. They'd met in a coffee shop near campus, both reaching for the same psychology textbook someone had left behind. She had laughed a sound like wind chimes and suggested they share it. That was 23 years ago. They'd dated for 2 years, passionate and turbulent, the kind of relationship that felt like destiny and disaster in equal measure. But when graduation came, David had been offered a position in Boston, while Monica was accepted into a graduate program in San Francisco. They'd tried long distance for 6 months before the calls grew shorter, the visits less frequent, the silences longer, and then Catherine had entered his life, calm where Monica was chaos, steady where Monica was storm. Catherine made sense. She fit into his 5-year plan. She didn't make him feel like he was standing at the edge of a cliff, so he'd chosen safety. He'd married Catherine, built a career, started a family, and he'd convinced himself he was happy. Then 3 years ago at a professional conference in Chicago, he'd seen Monica across a hotel ballroom. She was delivering a keynote speech on behavioral psychology, poised and brilliant, and when their eyes met, David felt 22 again. They'd had coffee, then dinner, then it was just one night, he told himself that first time. It doesn't mean anything, but it had happened again and again, until just one night became a pattern, a secret life running parallel to his real one. Monica never asked him to leave Catherine. She never made demands or ultimatums. She existed in hotel rooms and stolen weekends. A ghost of the life he'd almost lived. And David had told himself that made it somehow less wrong. Until this morning. Until she had loved him enough to let him go. Scene 4. The family breakfast. Dad, you're burning the pancakes. David blinked and looked down at the griddle, where smoke was rising from 3 blackened circles. His daughter Emma, 14 years old and brutally observant, was watching him with concern. Sorry, sweetheart. Mind was somewhere else. He scraped the ruined pancakes into the trash and started again while Catherine set the table and their younger daughter Lily chatted about the science fair project she was planning. Normal Sunday morning sounds. The kind of morning that appeared in insurance commercials and family magazines. Catherine kissed his cheek as she passed, and David caught the scent of her shampoo, the same lavender scent she'd used since they met. Familiar, comforting. Safe. You okay? She asked quietly. You seem distracted. For a moment David almost told her everything. The words were right there, pressing against his teeth. I've been having an affair. I've been lying to you for 3 years. I don't deserve your lavender shampoo or your morning kisses or the way you still believe I'm a good man. Instead, he smiled. Just tired, didn't sleep well. She nodded, accepting the lie because in 17 years he'd given her no reason to doubt him. The pancakes blurred in his vision, and he blinked hard against the burning in his eyes. Scene 5. The weight of evidence. That afternoon, while Catherine took the girls shopping, David sat in his home office with the velvet box open on his desk. The diamond earrings seemed to gather all the light in the room, throwing it back at him in accusation. He'd kept them. He didn't know why. Perhaps as evidence of his own failure. Perhaps as a reminder of Monica's grace in walking away. Perhaps because throwing them away felt like erasing her entirely. His phone buzzed. A text from Catherine. Emma wants to know if you can help with her history project tonight. Something about the Great Depression. Love you. The Great Depression. How fitting. David looked around his office, the diplomas on the wall, the photos of his family, the books on finance and business strategy. This was the life he'd built. This was what he'd chosen over Monica all those years ago, and then betrayed anyway with his cowardice. He'd wanted both. The excitement of the road not taken, and the security of the one he'd chosen. And in trying to have both, he'd dishonored them both. Another text arrived. But not from Catherine. An unknown number. I meant what I said. Don't contact me. I've blocked your email and changed my number after I send this. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I hope you learn to be present in your own life. I deserved more. But more importantly, your wife deserves more. Give her what you couldn't give me, your whole heart. Goodbye, David. Then, a moment later. Yes, the earrings were for me, not for you to give her. I don't want them anymore. Donate them, sell them. I don't care. I'm done being a secret. David set the phone down carefully, as if it might shatter. Monica had always been braver than him. She'd walked away from what was hurting her. She'd chosen dignity over crumbs. Could he do the same? Could he walk away from his own cowardice? Scene 6. The daughter's eyes. That evening, David sat with Emma at the dining room table, her history textbook spread between them. She was writing about the economic collapse of 1929. About the failures of systems people had trusted. Dad, can I ask you something? Emma looked up, her eyes serious behind her glasses, eyes exactly like Catherine's. Of course. How do you know if you're making the right choices? Like the people before the Depression, they thought everything was fine until it wasn't. How do you know before it's too late? David felt the question land in his chest like an arrow. At 14, she was asking about history. But he heard the broader question, the one every human asks. How do we know when we're building our lives on solid ground? I think, he said slowly, you know by being honest with yourself. By not ignoring the warning signs just because it's easier. By asking yourself if you could live with the consequences if the truth came out. Emma nodded thoughtfully, returning to her notes. She had no idea she'd just described her father's entire secret life, the ignored warnings, the convenient blindness, the terror of discovery. Later, tucking Lily into bed, David listened to his 8-year-old daughter talk about a friend at school whose parents were divorcing. She said they fought all the time, Lily whispered, as if the walls might hear. She said she knew it was coming. Dad, you and Mom won't get divorced, right? The trust in her eyes was absolute. The faith that her father would never let her world collapse. We love each other very much, David said, the truth and the lie tangled together in those words. He did love Catherine. Just not in the all-consuming way he'd loved Monica. Not in the safe, complete way Catherine deserved. He loved Catherine the way you love a house you've lived in. For years. Comfortable, familiar, essential. But he'd been treating that love like it was a given. like it was something that would endure no matter how many times he stepped outside its walls. Good, Lily said, yawning. Because I like our family. After she fell asleep, David stood in the hallway between his daughter's rooms, listening to the quiet sounds of his home, the hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the distant sound of Catherine watching television downstairs. These were the sounds of the life he'd chosen, and then betrayed, and now might lose. Scene 7. The confession. 3 days later, David did something he'd been avoiding for 3 years. He made an appointment with a therapist. Dr. Sarah Patterson was in her 60s, with kind eyes and an office that smelled of jasmine tea. She listened as David really talked for the first time about the double life he'd been living. The guilt that woke him at 3 in the morning, the way he'd compartmentalized until he'd almost convinced himself it was normal. I keep telling myself, I'll tell Catherine, he said, his hands gripping the chair arms. I keep thinking tomorrow, tomorrow. But I'm terrified of losing my family, of seeing that look in her eyes when she realizes I'm not who she thought I was. And who are you? Dr. Patterson asked gently. David was silent for a long moment. I don't know anymore. I used to think I was a good man who made one mistake. But good men don't keep making the same mistake for 3 years. Good men don't lie to their wives every day for 3 years. What changed? Why now? Monica left me a note. She said she was done being a secret. And I realized she had more respect for my marriage than I did. She walked away. And I'm still sitting here, trying to figure out how to keep lying. Dr. Patterson leaned forward. David, you can't heal what you won't acknowledge. And you can't move forward while you're still hiding. Your wife deserves to make informed choices about her own life. She'll leave me. Maybe, or maybe she won't. But that's her choice to make, not yours. You've been making all the choices for both of you by hiding this. That's not love. That's control. The word hit David like cold water. Control. He'd thought he was protecting Catherine, protecting his family. But really, he'd been protecting himself, controlling the narrative, keeping his options open. Scene 8. The slow unraveling. David didn't confess that night, or the next night, or the night after that. Instead, something quieter happened. He started being present. He came home on time. He put his phone away during dinner. He asked Catherine about her day and actually listened to the answer. He helped Emma with her homework, without checking his email. He played board games with Lily without his mind wandering to hotel rooms and secret messages. And as he did, he began to see what he'd been missing. The way Catherine hummed while cooking, slightly off-key, always the same 3 songs. The way Emma chewed her pencil when she was thinking hard. The way Lily told stories with her whole body, hands flying, eyes wide. The small intimacies of a shared life, the kind that can't exist in hotel rooms and stolen weekends. Catherine noticed the change. You've been different lately, she said one evening after the girls were in bed. They were sitting on the back porch, a rare moment of quiet. Happier maybe, or sadder, I can't quite tell. Both, David admitted. She waited, patient as always. This was Catherine's greatest strength and his greatest shame. She always gave him space to arrive at truth on his own time. She trusted him to get there. I haven't been fair to you, he said finally. I've been distant for a while now, and I'm sorry. Catherine took his hand. We all go through phases. Marriage is long. We can't be perfect all the time. But that was exactly the problem. She was giving him grace he didn't deserve, forgiveness for a crime she didn't know he'd committed. Scene 9. The clarity. 2 weeks after Monica's goodbye note, David sat in his car outside his house at midnight. The diamond earrings in his hand. He'd made a decision. Tomorrow morning he would tell Catherine everything. Not because the guilt was unbearable, though it was. Not because he wanted forgiveness, though he desperately did. But because Dr. Patterson was right. Catherine deserved to make informed choices about her own life. He would tell her about Monica, about the 3 years of lies, about the man he'd become and the man he wanted to be. And then he would let her decide what came next. If she wanted him to leave, he would leave. If she wanted counseling, he would go. If she wanted a divorce, he wouldn't fight it. Whatever she chose, he would respect it, because respect was what he should have given her all along. The earrings caught the streetlight, glittering in his palm. Tomorrow he would tell Catherine about these too. And then he would do what Monica had suggested: donate them, sell them, turn them into something useful. Turn his shame into something that might help someone else. David looked up at his house. The porch light Catherine always left on for him. The window to Emma's room, where a faint glow suggested she was reading past bedtime again. The flower boxes Catherine had planted last spring, now full of mums she'd carefully chosen because they'd still bloom in October. This was his life, his real life. And he'd been treating it like a backup plan, a safety net, something that would always be there no matter how carelessly he handled it. But nothing stays forever. Not if you don't tend it. Not if you don't honor it. He'd learned that now. Tomorrow he would tell the truth. Tonight he would sit with the weight of all his choices and find the courage to face their consequences. Scene 10. The morning of truth. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright. David had barely slept, rehearsing words that all sounded inadequate. He found Catherine in the kitchen, coffee already made, reading the newspaper at the counter, her weekend ritual. "Can we talk?" His voice came out hoarse. She looked up, and something in his face made her set the paper down. "Okay, let me just... Now, please, before I lose my nerve." They sat at the dining room table. The same table where they'd shared thousands of meals, where they'd done homework with the girls, where they'd planned vacations and discussed mortgages and laughed over silly things. The morning light was gentle through the curtains. David placed the velvet box on the table between them. And then slowly, carefully, with tears streaming down his face, he told her everything. He told her about Monica, about the conference in Chicago 3 years ago, about the hotels and the lies and the person he'd become. He didn't minimize. He didn't make excuses. He just told the truth. His voice breaking, his hands shaking. Catherine sat very still. Her face went through a dozen expressions: confusion, disbelief, hurt, anger, something that looked like grief. But she didn't speak. She let him finish. When he was done, the silence was enormous. Finally, she picked up the jewelry box and opened it. The diamonds caught the morning light. "Beautiful and terrible. She gave these back to you. She ended it 2 weeks ago. She said, I needed to be present in my own life. That you deserved better." She was right about that. Catherine's voice was steady, but tears were sliding down her cheeks. "How many times?" "Too many. I stopped counting. I'm so..." "Don't..." She held up a hand. "Don't say you're sorry yet. I need to think." She stood and walked to the window, her back to him. David waited, barely breathing. "Did you love her?" Catherine asked. "I loved who we'd been. A long time ago. But no, not the way I love you. That was the problem. I don't know what I wanted. The past. Maybe. The person I'd been before, responsibilities and mortgages and middle age. It wasn't about her. It was about me running from my own life. And now you're done running." She made the choice for me. She walked away. "But yes, I'm done. I want to be here. Really here. If you'll have me. If you can ever trust me again. I understand if you can't." Catherine turned back to face him. Her eyes were red, but her voice was clear. "I need time. I need space. I need to decide if I can forgive this. If I want to forgive this. You're going to sleep in the guest room. You're going to give me access to everything. Phone, email, all of it. You're going to tell the girls we're working through something. And we're going to counseling, real counseling, with someone who specializes in this. If I decide to try anything." "I'm not promising anything, David. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I feel like I don't know who you are. I know. But..." She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. "But we have 17 years. We have 2 daughters. We have a life. And I'm not throwing that away without at least trying to understand what happened. I'm not promising I'll stay. I'm promising I'll think about it." It was more than he deserved. Far more. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me yet. You have no idea how hard this is going to be. For both of us." She was right. The months that followed were the hardest of David's life. The counseling sessions that stripped him bare. The conversations with his daughters about why Dad was sleeping in the guest room. The nights Catherine cried and the nights she raged. And the nights she just sat in silence looking at him like a stranger. But he stayed. He showed up. He answered every question honestly, no matter how much it hurt. He learned to sit with Catherine's pain and not make it about his guilt. He learned to be patient, to wait, to let her heal on her own timeline. Slowly, so slowly, Catherine began to trust again. Not the blind trust she'd had before, but something harder one and more resilient. And David learned to earn it. Day by day, choice by choice. Epilogue. 2 years later, the diamond earrings sold for $12,000. David donated every penny to a women's shelter, a place where women were rebuilding their lives after betrayal, after abandonment, after learning to value themselves again. It felt right. Taking something born from his failure and turning it into a second chance for someone else. He and Catherine were still married. Still working on it. Some days were good, some days the hurt was still fresh. But they were honest now, painfully, completely honest, and that honesty had become the foundation of something new. Emma was applying to colleges now, writing essays about resilience and second chances without knowing how much her own family had needed both. Lily was thriving in middle school, still telling stories with her whole body. And Monica David had kept his promise. He'd never looked for her, never tried to contact her, but sometimes he thought about her with gratitude. She'd loved him enough to walk away. She'd loved herself enough to demand more than secrets. She had taught him what dignity looked like. One evening, Catherine found David on the back porch, lost in thought. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sitting beside him. "About how much I almost lost. About how lucky I am that you gave me a second chance." She took his hand, not the automatic gesture of before, but a choice, a conscious choice to reach for him. "We both chose this," she said. "Every day we're choosing to try. That's what marriage is, really. Not the wedding, not the promises. The choosing. Every single day." David squeezed her hand, tears in his eyes. "I choose you, today and tomorrow and every day after." "I know," Catherine said. "Finally, I know." And in the fading light of that October evening, sitting with his wife in the life he'd almost destroyed, David understood something Monica's goodbye note had been trying to teach him. You cannot hold two lives in your hands without dropping them both. You cannot love halfway and expect wholeness. You cannot build a future on lies and expect it to stand. But if you're brave enough to face the truth, if you're humble enough to admit your failures, if you're patient enough to earn back what you've broken, then perhaps, grace might find you after all. The moral isn't that mistakes can be undone. They can't. The scar tissue remains. The hurt leaves marks. But the moral is this: honesty, however painful, is the only foundation that holds. Presence, however difficult, is the only gift that matters. And dignity, both giving it and demanding it, is what separates a life well lived from a life merely survived. Sometimes goodbye is the kindest gift. Sometimes the truth is the hardest love. And sometimes the longest journey is the one that brings you home to the life you already have.